Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Teeberry. Let me also, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank you for the passage of House Bill 4849. Congresswoman Shorts talks about economic development. 4849 was extraordinarily important. Private activity bonds and the new market tax credit have been used to great advantage economically in Pennsylvania, and your bill protecting it from the AMT was extraordinarily important. Secondarily, building America's bonds, we need to extend what has been an extraordinarily successful program.
Governor, with all due modesty, let me take credit for all three of those provisions.
Well, Pennsylvania went to market in December and sold $900 million worth of bonds backed by Building America bonds at 3.1% interest, the lowest the Commonwealth has sold general obligation bonds since the 1960s, in part due to our good debt rating, but in part due to the Building America bonds program. It's an extraordinary program. It ought to be extended, and the Senate ought to move quickly to adopt 4849, in my judgment. It's a pleasure to be here today to talk about the Infrastructure Bank, and we do support the concept that's embodied. Building America's Future supports the concept embodied in Congresswoman Delores' bill. It's a good framework. Let me say, I won't repeat the questions of need. You've heard those. Let me begin by saying Infrastructure Bank's not a panacea. Congressman DeFazio is absolutely right. It's part of the broader problem. And we as a country have got to come to grips with the broader problem. We need, in my judgment, a decade-long infrastructure revitalization program which will do much good for us in terms of the substantive need of transportation and all other parts of our infrastructure. But more importantly is the single best job creator that this Congress can do for the American people. It's also the single best thing to bolster flagging American manufacturing. And ladies and gentlemen, if we don't do something about American manufacturing soon, there isn't going to be any American manufacturing. Let me give you just a few statistics from Pennsylvania. PennDOT, we were pleased to receive a letter from Congressman Oberstar saying that Pennsylvania is the second best state in the union in spending its ARRA transportation funds. We've got $1.2 billion under contract, 99.7% of the money given to us under stimulus. And you talk about small business, and I know this committee is very interested in small business. Of that $1.2 billion, let me give you a brief idea of what the impact is on small business. $993 million went to prime contractors under contract. 67% of that went to businesses with less than 100 employees. $238 million went to subcontractors. 87% of those contracts went to businesses with less than 100 employees. We have a tendency to think of manufacturing and construction activities as big business activities. They're not. The best remedy for small business, the best remedy for the American economy is a significant infrastructure revitalization repair program. And by the way, the American people agree. Building America's Future took a poll and found that 94% of Americans think infrastructure is important. 81% of Americans are willing to pay additional taxes if we change the way we allocate transportation and infrastructure dollars. And Congressman DeFazio, we took a second poll very recently. Frank Luntz, we employed Frank Luntz because we didn't want anybody to think we were cooking the books, so we employed Frank Luntz. And 61% of Americans, consistent Republican and Democratic alike, believe the gas tax, the federal gas tax, is indexed for inflation. And they're willing to accept that. 61% of Americans. Let me just give you an idea of what this does for American manufacturing. We did a study in Pennsylvania of the increase in manufacturing orders, and I think Congresswoman Schwartz knows about this. In the first 10 months of the stimulus, there were 4,300 additional tons of steel ordered in Pennsylvania, a 43% increase over the previous year when there was no stimulus. 3.5 million tons of asphalt, a 44% increase in the asphalt that was ordered. 440,000 cubic yards of concrete, a 50% increase in the concrete that was ordered the year before. So if you want to get the economy going, if you want to do something to bolster American manufacturing, let's do this. What part does the Infrastructure Bank play in this? A very important part, because it can bring additional funds into the mix. Private investment is waiting for a vehicle to invest in infrastructure. The infrastructure bank can be the perfect entity to leverage private funding. Felix Roatan, the man who saved New York, the financier who saved New York, sent me a letter to give to the committee and talking about how important it is and how we can leverage private investment. He even believes there are foreign funds who would invest in American infrastructure, and he's going to France next week to meet with several foreign funds about this very subject. Secondly, we do need to capitalize it, and we do need to spend some government money on the infrastructure bank. But the infrastructure bank can have tools that will help without spending one federal dollar. Credit enhancement, loan guarantees. Those things are important. They will work without the expenditure of a single federal dollar in most cases. Not in all cases, but in 95, 96, 97, 98% of the cases. I do believe, as Congresswoman Delores said, we have to capitalize the bank. Her figure is about right. I would double that. I would do $50 billion. The bank has to have its own bonding capacity. And why do we need the bank? We need it because there really is no vehicle in the current transportation system for funding multi-state projects or projects of national significance. We have, in the short term, because of ARRA, we have Tiger grants. And the Tiger grants actually took into consideration funding some projects that were multi-state. Pennsylvania was in on 2 projects that were funded for rail freight that had 6 states and 5 states involved in each of the respective projects. But if we're going to do a real high-speed national rail system, we can't do it state by state because you have to have one consistent method, whether it's maglev or other forms of high speed, and it can only be financed through a bank like this. The public will support it because the bank will be transparent, it'll be merit-based, there'll be project review, there'll be cost-benefit analysis, there'll be experts making the judgment. Does Congress lose all its power? Of course not. In this bill, you can set allocation formulas between wastewater and water, between transportation. You can set the criteria that the bank must consider and rank projects on. There can be congressional oversight of what the bank does. And Ranking Member Teaberry is absolutely right to be concerned about the loss of federal dollars given what's happened. But if you look at the EIB, the European Investment Bank, Congressman, the returns, the risk factor is not present. When you've got the private sector involved, they make sure that the projects invested in are good projects, sound projects that aren't going to default. There are ways of doing this and ways of protecting the federal dollars. But you can bring all of this together in such a way that we can help, absolutely help, just by allowing us to use the Treasury's interest rate as opposed to normal interest rate. That will help make projects doable that previously weren't doable. That doesn't cost the federal government any money. In fact, we actually get a rate of return on it. So the bank's capabilities are, I think, what the bank can do for us is very difficult for all of us to understand. It's necessary. We've got to move quickly to get this done. But again, I reiterate what Congressman DeFazio says. Let's get together and figure out a long-term way to finance the infrastructure needs of this country. The American people would support it. As Congresswoman Shorts has said, we've done it in Pennsylvania to a great degree, and people are supporting it. It's one of the reasons that Pennsylvania probably has the most robust economy, not a good economy, but the most robust economy of any large industrial state. Thank you.